Welcome to Vectorworks 2B, Lesson 5A. In this lesson we'll discuss rendering and the use of textures. I'm your guest lecturer, James Russell. So I've been playing with my little setup that I've got going on here for quite a while now, and I actually want to add some textures, so it's a good time to start talking about textures, how they work, how they can be applied, different things like that. So here I've just got a basic model. I'm going to improve upon this as we keep going, but just to kind of take a pause and talk about renderings. This is what you'd start off with as your basic wireframe, and we're quite used to this here. I can obviously go back to a plan view, and this is the view that we kind of know. And here, this is the isometric view that we know a lot about. Now, at the moment, this is rendered in wireframe. Wireframe is the quickest possible drawing method for Vectorworks. It's purely just lines, no textures, occasionally line fill, but that's pretty much it. So, the moment we start talking about renderings, there's some important things to notice here. So if you go from the view menu down to rendering, there's a whole heap of options. Now, if you've got the basic Vectorworks package, no RenderWorks included, you'll have these first 6 here, and you'll most probably have these last 6 here. You might have these 3 here in the middle as well, I'm pretty sure, but the capabilities aren't quite as good. And then obviously these kind of middle options here, the fast RenderWorks, custom RenderWorks, and artistic, as well as the RenderWorks stylings here, are only available with the RenderWorks package itself. So to quickly go through these, we're on wireframe at the moment. Sketch mode is much like wireframe, except everything is sketched to a degree, and it's not quite as effective. It's kind of a poor man's version of something else I'll show you in a second. OpenGL is the first actual 3D rendering where it will apply textures to the outside of objects. Now, it does only base colors and occasionally some other textures on top of that, such as opacity and glass textures. But the great thing about OpenGL is it actually enables you to fly around objects in real time with a real-time rendering. So you can see here I'm actually moving around some of the objects I've created in real time while they're being rendered, and it's the only render mode in Vectorworks that will actually let you do that. So it's a great thing if you want to show something off to a client, if you want to do a quick fly through of a movie or something like that without actually rendering it too much. You can use OpenGL. Looking here, we've also got some more options. I'll just jump over the RenderWorks stuff because we'll jump back to that. Hidden line rendering. Now this is one of the favourite designer ones, particularly for doing working drawings. What hidden line will do, and my computer will take a moment to render this, but it actually renders all the lines that you would see from your current perspective, and that's it. So if you currently see the edge line of something, you'll see that, but you won't see any trace lines behind it. So as this is loading in here, for example, this wall that's hidden behind the bar here, in wireframe we can see the walls there, but in this case I know that this bench that I've made along here is actually in front of the wall, so it'll only draw the pencil lines in for the top marker of this bench and not the lines behind it. Mine's going to take a moment to think about that. So there we are. Now that's, as you can see here, all the lines that are hidden behind this bench are not shown. The most detailed thing, which took the most time to render there, was these chairs here, which are some sort of cane or wire design. So it had a little trouble with those, but you can see here this table, and I'll zoom in. It's actually drawn quite nicely here in the hidden line mode. It looks really quite nice, especially these items here that we've made. So while we focus on that a little bit more, and I'll see if I can do it to this section here, I'd prefer not to include the chairs in my initial render, so I'll see if I can just do it this portion of the wall here. Now we know that obviously there's lines behind here, so the next mode that we're going to use is the dashed hidden line, and hopefully, if this will render up rather quickly for us. What essentially dashed hidden lines will do is place any of the solid lines that you saw with the hidden line rendering on top, and then any trace lines behind it will be shown in a dashed line. Now it's especially great for if you want to do flats or details of stairs or objects like that that might have framing or bracing behind them. What you can actually use is the dashed hidden line will show the outside surface as a whole, and then behind it can show the framing materials required to make that piece itself. So that's the finished view right there. You can see hopefully some solid lines through here, and these are actually dashed lines. They mightn't show up at this scale, but hopefully you can see them on your screen that they are actually dashed lines. There we go, they are actually dashed lines in there. And obviously you might have to change that depending on the scale of the drawing. I think this is still set to when I was doing the Lego project, which had quite a small build. But that's it there. So I'm just going to jump back to a wireframe now, and you can see all my lines have become solid. It takes me back to something familiar. And we're just going to talk about polygon shading. Under here, under rendering once again, you can find a whole heap of shaded polygon options. They're quite self-explanatory, but unshaded polygons. And it will take, once again, another moment to render. You can always watch this little bar down the bottom here as well. And if you hold down escape at any point in time, just keep holding it down, and that can cancel a render if you're finding it taking too long. So So as you can see here, it's a little bit tough with the table setting, but especially here, all these have now become solid and fully shaded in their respective colours. Now if you did have a colour on one of these objects, I won't do it now, but it would actually come through as a solid colour. It won't do textures though, so solid colours are fine, but patterns and textures it won't actually apply. Just continuing to run through these, we're going to go down to the shaded polygon. See here it's rendering that out, and you can see it's put some depth shading on here, so just to try and give this image a little bit more perspective, a little more depth. So I'll just keep moving through, rendering. So shaded polygons, no lines, as you can imagine. It just shades the polygons but takes away the lines here. The seats are the biggest thing in my drawing at the moment. That's what's taking up all of the power. My build list is just completing now. So there you go, as the name suggests, it's taken away a lot of the lines that were there. This bench in particular is one that now, I can't actually see it because it's all white, but if that was rendered out with some sort of colour there, you might be able to see that. The last one here is the final shaded polygon, and this is where it really kicks in, and it's going to take once again a little while for my computer to register this. So there we go. As you can see, that's the final version. It's quite a bit better. It's a really good overview. Yeah. So moving on from here, we go to the more detailed stuff. And jumping down here, just quickly jump into Fast Renderworks. Now I haven't got any textures on. We will recover these ones in particular when we start talking about applying textures, but just as an overview, Fast Renderworks, as the name suggests, is the fastest version of the Renderworks package. It still will take a while to load, especially with this drawing I'm doing here, but there you go. You can see now these chairs which already have a texture, if I zoom in here it'll probably re-render, but it is showing them in quite a lot of detail here, and all of this is looking pretty crisp. I'm just going to amp that up a little bit and throw on the final quality Renderworks, and this is one of the highest modes that you can go to. You can see it'll render everything quite detailed here. All those lines that were slightly jagged on this table are now gone. All of this, all the circles in particular is something that you'll notice here are quite good. Just going again, the custom Renderworks, it's very similar to this by its base default, but clicking on the additional options you can amp it up even further, so you can, say the curve geometry must be very high, all of that kind of thing. This, at the equivalent level of all of these being high, except for blurriness and the environmental lighting, it makes up the option which is actually the final quality Renderworks. So this one here is the equivalent of this on the high mode. If you want to take it a step further you can, or if you want to drop it back a step you can. Artistic Renderworks is the one that you might spend a lot of time on if you find yourself enjoying programs such as Photoshop and Illustrator. This one's definitely for you. I'm just going to kick it right off the bat and click on it, and it's going to take a moment to load, but essentially the Artistic Renderworks is a tiny package inside itself. It's got about 15 different options inside there, and it mainly covers things like cartooning, sketching, basic line drawings, pastels, any of that kind of thing, watercolors as well. It mainly, if you want to take what is a perfect, in this example 3D drawing, and turn it into something which is meant to look a little more rustic, a little more hand sketched perhaps. You can already see here loading on my screen it will take a little while, especially with this advanced geometry, but it's already starting to sketch out in quite soft pastely kind of lines what my design would look like had it been hand drawn or sketched. I'll only run through a few examples of this in this little demonstration. I might show you a few snippets at the end when I've completed my drawing, but as you can see each of these does take a little while, and my computer is quite fast, so compared to maybe if you're doing this on a MacBook or something like that, it might take quite a while. So I'm going to pause this quickly and I'll come back as soon as this is done. So there we go, that's my finished product there for now. I'm just giving you a demonstration of that. Now I will try one more rendering mode here, just dropping down to the Artistic Renderworks options. And from here, this will take a moment to load, but you can see here's the list of the different options here. I'm going to try out, and if you click on it, it'll show you a little example. Not really. Maybe hatching. What do you think about that? That's kind of cool. Now obviously it's highly impractical. Most of these ones here, the pencil rough sketching, they look great. The pen also, if you want to have more of a traced look. Crayons and the brushed watercolours, they're more for if you're doing the outside of buildings that were meant to have a rough concept idea to it. I'm just going to try the hatch as an example, and as I said, I might throw a few more in at the end. This one's rendering out quite quickly, it seems. Gives it kind of a neon futuristic look. Still quite an amazing job that it does for this package here. So there you go. Obviously the detail is lost here on some of my objects just due to the mapping that it's chosen. So now we've covered a few of the rendering styles, and I'll reiterate on those at the end of the lesson when we have a look at some final products. But I'm just going to hit 0 for now, which takes us back to plan view, which is obviously in wireframe all the time. And I'm just going to throw these chairs here. I don't think they're on a class called Furniture Main. Excellent. There we go. Just for the time being, I'm going to turn off this class here, Furniture Main, which was created. Some objects, when you bring them in, as these 3 chairs and this table was, I brought them in from the resource browser. And some, you'll notice, will have their own classes and layers which are brought in occasionally for themselves. So the sills, obviously, that's come from my windows here. The glazings also come from that. The ceiling main, I'm not sure where that's come from. Might be from here, or might be from the doors. But definitely this Furniture Main. And if I click OK on that, those will disappear. Now it's also taken my table away, so what I'm going to do is actually drop this down, go back onto here. I'm going to select that table, and I'm just going to throw him onto the none. So that means now when I go back to none, you can see the chairs are gone but the table remains. So just changing his class, which I'm using as a smaller subdivision of my major layer here, Design Layer 1. Now the reason I'm doing that is because I really want to focus on what we've got going on here, and I'm in an isometric view, and I just want to run through how you apply textures and how mapping works. So maybe we'll just start off with a more basic example out here on the side. I'm just going to quickly draw, and I'll put this on the layer plane. Excellent. So here's a basic box, and I'm just going to extrude that around to 500. Okay. And I'll also draw a cylinder, because cylinders and boxes have slightly different mapping types to them. Cancel that, going to extrude to about there. Okay, and if I render these, I'm going to do it in the final, the final quality Renderworks, and it'll take a moment to re-render there. There we go. So I've got a slightly shaded box here, and I've got this shaded cylinder here. What I'm going to do is go to my Render tab in the Object Info. If you don't have Object Info open, you can go to Window, Palettes, and find Object Info inside here. So the third tab along is Render, and by default things will be on their class texture. Now, if in your Classes menu here, we had none set to use texture at creation and chose one of these textures as a default, especially on the other tab here, it would be using that as the default texture. In this case though, the class texture is set as nothing. So I can choose from here to drop down. I've got a couple here that I've been using so far just to play with, and there's obviously a list more. You can choose maybe this brick texture here. The moment I click that, this will update, and you can see it's got the brick texture applied to it. So when we talk about textures, there's a few modifiers here. The first one is the mapping type, and I'll just come back to that in a moment, but we've also got scale. So increasing the scale will make the objects appear larger on the blocks, and obviously decreasing. Don't feel limited by this bar though, because you can actually just type a number in here. Obviously, often when you grab this bar, it'll either be set to 1 or 10 at either extreme. If you need to go to say 0.01, or if you need to go to 100, feel free to type it in and the bar will scale accordingly. Now there's also the horizontal and the vertical offset here. Now these have semi been replaced by this object mapping tool here, but they are still essential if you want to be moving things by a slight amount. So if I type in -5 here, hopefully you'll notice the bricks will shift slightly across. Now it wasn't a large amount of change there. If I do say -500 though, you'll notice the bricks will shift quite a lot. Obviously a tessellating pattern doesn't show it off as well as it could, but definitely this one here, the rotation value, grabbing this and rotating it, and you can see that everything here is rotating on the object. So now I'm at 32. I could run these on a 45-degree angle like that, which gives quite a trippy pattern. or I could spin them a full 90 degrees, 180 degrees, all the way around until they got to 360 degrees back to where they were. You've also got repeats, so does it repeat in which direction? So that's if it was not to repeat horizontally, and if it didn't repeat vertically, it's probably stuck on the other side somewhere around there. Just turn those back on, and you can flip the texture if you need to, so it's not going to show here with a tessellating pattern, but if it's an image and you need to flip it vertically or horizontally, you can do that as well. So the mapping type here, this is something that's often a little bit confusing, especially with 2012. There's 5 options. There used to only be 3 options, which was planar mapping, cylindrical mapping, and perimeter mapping. Perimeter mapping essentially finds the perimeter of the object, so of one side in this case, and whichever has the largest perimeter is the primary map. So I'll also apply this same texture here to this cylinder. There we go. Now what it's done here essentially, and this box I could probably make a little bit bigger to show it off, but what perimeter mapping's done in this case has chosen which face has the largest perimeter. So, or in this case it could also be considered surface area, and it's the outside of this cylinder here. So it said, okay, the outside of the cylinder has the largest surface area, so therefore I'm going to choose that as the primary map. And you can see it's wrapped the bricks around the cylinder. In this case here, one of these edges of the block, or probably 4 of these edges in this case, have the largest amount of area, so it's chosen to run it this way, then down, then across, then back. And you can see the top and the bottom most probably, and especially here the top and the bottom don't correlate to what you're seeing. So that's what perimeter mapping does. It will choose the largest side or the largest surface area side, and it will apply the mapping to that. Now running through here, cylindrical mapping, if I choose this, you can see it's changed it slightly. It's chosen a cylindrical shape, but it all radiates out from a point on the cylinder, making the top and the bottom seem this kind of wacky pattern here. If I apply cylindrical mapping here as well, you can see it gives this kind of effect. Now if I can, I'll try and show you what's happening here. It's actually choosing a cylinder, and it'll probably appear more appropriately here. And when the cylindrical mapping happens, it's particularly for circular objects. It'll choose a radial point with a circle around it, and then you get to choose where the mapping applies to within this cylinder. So you can see I'm starting to choose the mapping point here, and in this case even here wrapping around. So that's what's happening there. It's trying to spread the texture across a 0 point. If it doesn't make sense, that's fine, and sometimes it gets a bit convoluted, especially with this mapping type. Just know there's different options here. So I'm going to press escape there, and you can see now it should take that central point that I'd focused already and focus everything else towards it. There's also spherical mapping. I've just got to get off my mapping tool, and we'll talk about the mapping tool a little bit later on. Jump back into final quality. Okay. So as opposed to cylindrical, we're going to choose spherical. And spherical is very interesting. It actually radiates from a central point out in a spherical fashion. Now, it's great obviously for doing spheres, but most of the other objects that don't have slightly curved rounded surfaces on it will appear quite strange with cylindrical mapping. This one here is especially strange. And I'll see once again if I can show you here with the object mapping. What it's actually doing is wrapping the texture around a sphere as best it can. You can see here, the closer I bring it up, it actually scales up or down, and if I select this object here, hopefully, you can see it's trying to map that to a sphere. It's really hard to see, and if you have a chance to play with this, it's kind of fun to play with, because the mapping tool is something new that didn't exist before. But spherical mapping works really well for any object that's created from curves, such as silk, bed sheets, that kind of thing. Once again, if you don't get it, because to be honest sometimes I don't, just move on. Now the new option here to 2012 is the auto align plane and the planar. So the plane normally, and I'll just select it here, runs the bricks in the most common plane. I'll see if it will apply it here. So what it's done is chosen one particular planar point. Now in this case it seems to be the front point of this one and the front also of this sphere, so it would suggest that the plane is currently looking head on at these two objects from this direction. I'll see if I can draw a line as if we were looking at them this way. Okay, and essentially what it's done is it's mapped that to one particular face, and then every edge point, it's just taken whatever was last on there, the very edge pixel, and it's just run it along that face here. Same thing with here, you can see it's mapped it to this central point here. I'll see if I can draw a line on it. It's mapped it to there as being the central location, and then taken the image and just wrapped it, and if you have a look, it just bleeds all the way out and all the way across the top. Now what's the use in this particular planar instance? It's a good question. Planes are particularly used when you need to reference something onto a particular face or around an object. We're going to talk about it when we try and put some posters on this wall, for example, but it really needs to be mapped to a plane, and in this case a plane means one surface or one particular face of this object. So this rectangle here, and in this case this front area here of this cylinder, it's taking as the plane. The last option here, which is the auto align plane, will hopefully return things semi back to normal, and it should also be here on this one as well. And what it's done, it's kind of, this is like the smartest version of all of those, where it chooses the most appropriate mapping style for whatever the object is here. So in this one you can see it's chosen to wrap that around the cylinder, yet also over the top in a certain extent, and here it's chosen probably perimeter mapping for each of these. Now it's good to leave it on here. An auto align plane will most of the time, almost 95% of the time, get it right, but there's some instances where you might have to change it yourself. Perimeter mapping also 95% of the time it'll be fine, but sometimes you need to change it, especially if you're working with intense curved objects. So now that we've briefly talked about that, let's have a look back over here at applying a texture and creating a texture. So once again, I'm back here in a final quality render for this. I'm going to zoom back into my table and we're going to discuss some of the texture options. So you've seen me before, and I'm just going to ungroup this particular set of objects. There we go. And focus on perhaps the plate first. It's going to render out for me. Probably pause that halfway through. Let's actually focus on the fork. That's going to be the most fun. So what I'm going to do is drop down the class texture, and I'm going to choose a metal. Now I'm just going to choose a base one here. Let's have a look at some metal aluminium. It's going to re-render that. It's actually probably going to blend with the table a little bit too much. So you can see you just drop it down and choose one. Now I'm not quite happy with that, and I don't think any of the other metals here. We can just have a look at some of this. Chrome polished. That's not bad actually. Let's see how that looks on our knife as well. Don't choose chrome polished. That's not half bad. Not half bad. You can see some small amount of reflection on there. I actually choose the same one for this. No, I choose brushed for that. Let's have a look at polished on that one as well. Now it's quite a high reflectivity rate going on there. Probably a little bit too much for my liking. So what I'm going to do is click this little arrow here, and I get to choose to either edit the metal chrome polish resource, which means editing the existing file, or I can duplicate it and make a new one. So I'm going to duplicate it. It's going to be called custom 2. Sorry, I've just got a new keyboard and I'm getting used to it, especially at 3 AM in the dark. So what we're going to do here, these are the current existing settings, and I'll just run through what each of these mean. Essentially we have 4 shader options here, and yours will look slightly different if you're running on a Mac, but you'll have the same options. Color, and color means what color is it as the base color. So underlying behind all 3 of these add-ons is the base color. In this case we've got a Fresnel option, which means it's kind of like a bleed or a gradient of varying color between these 2 colors here. You can also choose, and I'll drop it down here, you can choose to have a base image, you can have a flat color, or you can have one of the 4 modifiers, and these are the 4 base modifiers of bricks, noise, pavement, and tiles. And inside each of these, for example, if I go into tiles, there's probably another 15 to 20 options for each one. So I select a tile and click edit. You can see it's giving me a little preview here of something quite wacky going on. But if you drop down this list, there's quite a few different options, and each of those 4 categories that I spoke of before has all of these, where you can choose a different look. It'll give you something else to look at, choose the colors, choose the widths, all that kind of stuff that you might want to make a custom texture with. So I'm going to click cancel on that because I actually quite like my Fresnel finish on here. And has it taken away my options? It has. So I'm going to click cancel on that, cancel my changes, and go back in, because I do actually like what it's done here. It's a little bit too reflective for me. So duplicate, click OK. For no colors, that's fine. So reflectivity, now at the moment it's on mirror mode, and there's a couple more options here. You can have backlit, you can have a glass reflectivity, glow, metallic, mirror, and plastic. Now I don't quite want a mirror finish on this, I actually want a metallic finish on this. So I've done that there. I can click edit, you can adjust a few things. So what's the base color of reflection, the pattern, so it can be metallic, brushed, or turned. And how much reflection is there, how much blurriness is there. So if this was to be a mirror, how much light would be refracted off it, and how blurry would the light be after, or how diffused would the light be after it comes off. So I'm going to be happy with that. Transparency, is it see-through? Well, not in this case, but you can have a base color transparency, glass transparency, plane transparency, or the rectangular mask. And as well, you can add in these ones, the bricks, noise, pavement, and tiles. So if you had a tile, for example, transparency, it would be in a tile pattern, and where the tiles were would be translucent to a varying degree. The last one's bump. We might see if we can come to bump in a second, but essentially bump is used for making scales, for making indents into pavement, and what bump actually normally does is apply a 3D surface to a 2D object, if that makes sense. So it chooses one side and then it physically scrunches or indents, presses into that surface to make it look as though it's 3D. And in some cases, if you choose a 3D bump, and I think there's a fair few in here that are actually 3D options available. I'll see if the pavement, for example, if that's going to let me have an edit option on that. It's just applying a pavement texture. You can see it's semi there. If I click edit here, some of these should have a 3D option on them. Took me a little moment there, but I found it under the noise shader. The noise shader actually applies some 3D options to it. So if we choose blistered turbulence, which sounds amazing, you can choose to have it 2D wrapped, which means it's visually done with black and white shading, or you can actually have it 3D solidly wrapped, which means it physically pushes in and out of the surface of the object. So I'm going to click cancel on that. I don't actually want any bumping to occur on this. I'm going to click OK, see how that re-renders out. Yeah, it could be shinier, couldn't it? Just going to have a play with it here for a second. So after a little bit of experimentation, I found something that I liked, which was just a variance on the metal chrome. The thing that I had to change here, my Fresnel shader had tinges of blue inside it, and I actually need that to have a tinge of grey to it. So that's worked out quite well there. I'm going to leave this plate here as white and this plate here as white, because I'm pretty happy with those, and I'll move on here to the wine glass. That might take a moment to render out to get the rest of that happening. So let's look at glass textures, and these are often the fun ones to play with. We've got glass clear, we've also got a couple here, glass opaque, glass smoke, and glass blue. Why don't we start with smoke, see what happens. Ooh, pretty. You can see this here, and I'll try and click off it. Obviously it's got a slight translucency because we can see underneath here it's got the grey table showing through, but it also has reflectivity because you can see this cup here is actually reflected in the surface, and the plate also, which makes it really, really nice. I'm just going to run through the others here to see if I like them. Oh, once again, that's awesome. So this is just giving you a little taste, you know. Just obviously I don't play with these every day. Glass opaque, so I'd expect this to be quite translucent. I think that's probably the one I'm going to go with because that's the most realistic. I'll also chuck an opaque one on that. Oh yeah, that looks great. That looks great. And the last one I'm going to do here, I'm going to actually use probably the glass opaque again, or it'll be the frosty glass. No, see, that's too opaque. because I'm actually going to make that almost like a wine glass, a wine bottle, sorry. So I'll choose the glass clear or the glass blue. Just see. Oh no, I don't want that one. Hold down escape, cancels my render. Glass blue, was that the one that had the tinge to it? Yeah, that's a good starting point. So I'll start off with this one. And I'll escape that because I can see what that's going to look like, but I'm actually going to edit the glass blue duplicate, glass blue 3 in this case. It's going to give me a rendered preview of that, and it's not quite accurate because it's not, glass is particularly hard because it needs to render off things in the background, so I'm just going to have to guess what I need. I don't know why it's using an image color. Let's have a look at that. Maybe glass has a default image. Ah, I see. So if I change this to a flat color and then choose my lovely dark green, that's getting pretty close. That's getting pretty close. Yep, that's what I'm wanting. Sure, we'll work with that for now. You can see every time I move my mouse at the moment it's rendering that out, so best to jump back to wireframe, have a look at some more of our surroundings. Now I'm going to have a look at these walls here using my magic wand, which I don't think we've discussed, but it's pretty easy. You just choose from here, what do you want to select? I want to select all the things that have the same object type, so I'm going to click on a wall, selects all the walls for me. Pretty straightforward. Now there's a couple of important things about walls that you'll find out eventually, and some other shapes as well, occasionally rectangular prisms. If you drop down this part list here, apart from choosing the overall, you can choose the left or right side, the starting cap, the end cap, the top, the bottoms, and any of the holes, which means any cutouts that there are. So in this example here, I'm going to choose the left hand side, and I don't remember which way I drew this wall, so it'll just be by trial and error. I'm going to choose the red brick, and I'm going to quickly render that. I might just jump onto fast Renderworks for just a moment. It saves us waiting around all this time. So the interior side seems to be the left hand side, so I want to make that something a bit nice. Have I got maybe a stone marble grey? No, that's not. Yuck. I had one before that I used, which was really nice. It's glossy, isn't it? Just hang on, I'll be right back when I find one. Alright, I'm back and I found one. I'm going to use this staccato medium white small. I'm sorry if that was completely wrong. And then I'm going to use the right hand side, and I did like that brick, so I'm going to keep the brick on the outside there. I know it looks a bit tacky, but in my case we're not going to see it, so that's fine. Then I'm going to grab this bench top here, and just so we push all the boundaries, I'm going to make sure that that is a marble bench top. There we go. That's alright. And I'd also like this to be a wood of some variety, just so we play with all of our possible options. That's disgusting. That's also pretty gross. I'll leave it as that for now. I'll do some changes later on. So I'm going to jump back into a plan view, try and remember which ones of these I've edited. So I edited this set here, so I'll get rid of that, and I'll get rid of that. Select all of these components again, because I want my little table settings to be the same. Grab my rotate tool. What was my rotation by? 360 divided by 3. 120 degrees. Should have had that on rotate and copy mode. Lovely. Might turn my chairs back on as well, just so I can have a look at everything before I go ahead and make this into something else. Chugga 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 chugga. There's one more element that I forgot here, and I made a floor that I really wanted to cover in a checkered pattern. Now there isn't currently a black and white checkered pattern in here, so I'm going to make my own. So using my resource browser, I've got it hiding away here on my second screen, but I'm going to go to my current document, which is Untitled 1, ironically. You can see there's already a fair few textures in here, so I'm going to just right click and go New Renderworks Texture. So click on that, brings up the same dialog box as we saw before, or relatively similar. So what I'm going to choose here is that it's going to have a tiled color as its base. See if there's a square tile in here. Squares? Yep. And that's currently, you can see red and green, which is what I want. So I want that to be black and white. Okay. I don't want that. And then the grout color, I want there to actually be no grout, so I'm going to see if I can change that to a 0 in there. Okay, there we go, black and white. Sorry. And then I want it to have a slight reflectivity, so I'm just going to have a basic reflectivity of plastic thrown onto there. Doesn't really show it to me there. I'll see how that goes. Put it onto a sphere is sometimes handy as well, so you can see what's happening. That's pretty close. And then I'm going to apply that texture here. I can't remember what it's named. I'm going to hope it's number 4. Nope, that's something completely different. What was that called? Texture 1. Alright then, texture 1 it is. Texture 1. Now it's going to apply onto there, and you can see it's really, really small. So I'm going to bring that up, scaling, scaling, scaling. I want it to be quite large. Oh, that's so retro. Oh, somewhere in between, maybe a 60 odd. Yeah, that's rocking. That's how it's going to be. Cool, super kitsch, super awesome. So I'm just going to jump back here into a plan. I want to duplicate these out a few times so I get an impression of what's going to happen in my little restaurant. Sorry about that, had a minor crash, but we're back operating now. Something about my recording software and the drawing options here having a few issues. So that's a window, so I can put some seats there, so that's a good place to start. And then I want to copy that, so I'd love to have 3 down here via the windows. 1 there, maybe even 4. Can I do back to back? Yeah, that's going to be really good. I kind of want to shove 1 in the corner there. Maybe if I distribute those out. This is just me doing it on the fly. I might speed it up. We'll see what happens. Lovely. That's a doorway, but I'd still like to have 1 over here. Probably hug that against the wall if I can. That's pretty good. And then I want a couple more just randomly kind of thrown around. Maybe 1 here. Holding down my wrong keys again on my new keyboard. So I think it's going to look something like that. And just to mix it up, I'm just actually going to rotate these all slightly askew, just so they don't all look the same. There we go. Now none of them are the same. Have a look at that in a 3D view. Obviously it's going to take a little bit longer than we're used to. and maybe I'll also fly around to this side here. And if I do that in the fast Renderworks option, hopefully we'll get a really quick view. There we go, so that's finished up. Just gonna have to render out that corner again. That's getting pretty close to what I wanted. Now another little thing we're going to talk about, because I want to do some here, is the mapping on this wall. Now we had the inside walls being the left. So this wall here, I've got the left selected, and what I want to do is actually import some images in that I'm going to stick along this wall here, almost like pictures. So from my drop down here, I'm going to open my resource browser, and I'm going to add in here a new resource, image. I'm going to import an image file. I'm going to open this up. Now it's going to take me somewhere completely random. I want to go to, where did I save those? Into my pictures. There we go. So I've saved some of these here. Open these up. Yep, that's excellent. Pin that open so you can see it's imported one. I can do the same thing here. New image. Yep, import one. I just randomly googled some of these old kind of retro posters. Some of them are complete fakes, but that's alright. There we go. Okay, and one more. New image. There we go. Now what I can do is add a decal, and this is a new option in 2012. So what I'm going to do is click add decal, and it says do you want to change the mapping type. Now we can do this on a wall because it's a flat surface, so if I click yes here, and I'm going to choose to import an image. No, I want to reuse an existing image file, and I'm going to choose, let's start with this one here. It's going to ask me for a size. Now I don't know the size yet. 1000, we'll try that out. It's going to have a brief think about that. Hopefully it's brief. Thinking. Loading. Pre-render, render. Now I'm going to grab our object mapping tool, and you can see here it's actually put it down here in the corner. I can't seem to grab it, so I might have to rotate my view in a moment. Can I grab hold of that? Can I please? No. Fine. Okay, so I've rotated that around, grabbed my object mapping tool, I've selected this wall, and it's automatically got the decal selected here. Now what I can do is grab this decal and drag it somewhere. It's going to take a moment to think, because it's redrawing some of these objects in. Once again in a moment. Yeah, I will. It's chosen this, here we go. I can put this poster here, I'm calling it a poster at least. And I'm going to scale it up when it gives me a moment. It's taking quite a while to think about doing that. I'm actually going to turn off some of this geometry going on here. Don't need that. I could, sure, render it out. Let's see if I can scale this up as well. Cool. Maybe give that a slight rotation, like 10 degrees. Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about. So that's good. See if I can go back out here. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to drop this down here. Click off the wall. Okay, so that's one poster done. I'm going to see if I can put one on all the rest of these walls, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've put a few more objects in here just to give you a really quick overview. If I jump into my fast Renderworks, you can see on this wall over here I've thrown two paintings in here. That looks pretty good. And over on this wall here, I have to move my resource browser. You can see I've put in two posters over here, and I've also put in a menu over here, so it's almost getting like a little diner, which is kind of cool. But now I'd really love to put some figures in, and this is where you costume guys might start to get some ideas, because although this looks, it's on the way, it's not the best work I've done, let's all be honest here, but it is starting to represent something, and I would really like to represent some people in costumes. Now I'm going to use a tool in here, and it's going to take me a moment to find it, but under your create image prop, so it's under the model menu for you guys in Spotlight, and there's an option called create image prop. Now I'm just going to jump into a plan view to make this a little bit easier. Okay, now I'm going to go here, create an image prop. It says what do you want to do? Well, I want to import an image file because I don't have anything yet. You can see here I've got my lovely waitress photo. Now it's going to give it a name, an approximate height and width. It's just chosen those kind of randomly. It's according to pixel size, but really. Now in this case, you get two options, no mask and using a mask. Now those of you who have done your Photoshop class will know that masking is essentially an area of selection which you can then use to either extract, delete, or fill with something else. Now I'm going to click use mask. I'm going to go create mask. I'm going to use the image that we're currently using. Also use it imported hit, no, so reuse another image. I'm going to use the same image as my mask. I can choose that there's a transparent color, and this is going to be quite difficult. I'll see if I can get her to be exact. So just playing with these sliders, I'm trying to get it as close as I can. That's probably the best I'm going to do in this scenario. Maybe she'll just have to be semi-translucent. Maybe just hold there a sec. Okay, so I had a quick pause there. What I'm actually going to do is cancel that and use a mask, but what I did is jump into Photoshop, and with a quick lasso I've made a black and white outline of her there, so I can go to the transparent color now and clearly just have a black and white, so you can see the black area here is the area that's going to be masked. Now there's a couple options here. Crossed planes, essentially if you're making trees, something that is reflective in both the flat and the vertical plane. I'll show it to you in a moment what I mean. And there's a few other options here. This one's confusing, auto rotate to the viewer. Decheck it for now and I'll show you what it does in a sec. Click OK, you'll get this, a line. Now what I'm going to do with my line, we'll just pop it there for now, that's okay. And I'm going to set that as my focal point, and you'll see it's actually a plane. Now what happens here if I zoom in and go to a render, and it'll take a moment, still calculating the geometry, and it'll start loading all those items in. Oh, look at that! Look at that! Now I've got a person. So that's pretty cool. In my shape data here, I'm just going to look. She's actually quite tall. It's just the perspective that we're given that she's actually not that tall. Let's just have a look in a front view. Go back to a wireframe. I think also her image might be a bit small. Let's just bump her up to 2.4. That's probably going to be a bit more reasonable, I reckon. Obviously without having much else to compare to in there is also a bit hard. So I'm just going to let that have a think. And then I'll just demonstrate cross planes, and then I'll do a couple more examples. So there's her in there. Now there's two options available to us essentially that we're going to look at now. I'm going to grab her if I can. There we go. The first one is auto rotate, and essentially this just puts her flat onto us, the viewer. And it'll do it with anything. So this is great if you want people to be looked in the eye when they're looking at your drawings, when you want something. So the perspective changes slightly, but it always means that she's facing us. The other option that you can't have on concurrently is crossed plane. So I'm going to decheck that. It'll take another moment to render. There we go. The other one is cross planes. Now this is only really effective with trees. I'll do a tree example outside in a sec, but cross planes essentially means not only is it one flat plane but two flat planes, so they make an X. And with objects that are tessellated all the way around, this works really well. It won't work well here. You can see she just morphs into two of herself. So that's a handy one to know. I'm going to do a few more examples and then we're going to do an overview. So I've done a little more work, as you can see, and this is kind of where I'm going to leave off here. This is one of my snapshots. I've also got a second one. Just give me a moment. And here's my second render as well. You can see I've done a few additions to this. Not only this image prop, but also the background here. I've placed a large image prop of just a background street that I found. I've added a few chandeliers that I found in the library, and the menu on the wall, which could be a little bit bigger. I'll see how I go with that. It's looking quite good though. The texture here, I don't know why that's mucking up on the table leg, but I haven't looked at it yet. I'll see what happens. But yeah, that's pretty much as I'm going to do to demonstrate the capabilities. I've spent probably 2 hours, maybe a bit over, just playing with this from start to finish. Including this recording time, just to give you an overview of where I'm at. I've put a roof on top of this thing. Just if I take that away, which is here, roof main, that was just a class that was made. Got the random image of a dog and a man and his dog walking here. This is just some background images of streets that I just found off Google. And then you can see just some chandeliers, the image prop, all the rest is texture based. So hopefully that gives you a greater understanding of textures, texture mapping, a little bit of an overview. Just a quick one for you here to have a play with is the walkthrough tool. It's really pretty simple. After you've clicked on it, it'll restrain you to this little box here. And normally after that point in time, it's in a plan view at the moment, but I'm going to press the 2 key to put it in front. And you'll see something here, and the way it works is it's just like an old Duke Nukem shoot 'em game. You click and hold in the middle of the screen. If you move down, you'll move away. You can see it's starting to draw here. Move upwards, you'll move forwards, and then you turn left and right. So I'm turning right here, turn left here. So I'll zoom back a little bit here till I go to the edge of my model, and then you can hold down the Alt key, which will move you up and down. So you can get to here, move in somewhat to here perhaps. If I like this view here, say I like that there, I can then press my render keys. So I'm using Control Shift G there. It'll have a little think about that. You can see the geometry going down the bottom corner and render that out for me. Something like that. That's in OpenGL. I haven't done it in the full render mode, but that's how it works. You can fly around in OpenGL if your computer can hack it. Mine is obviously struggling to get there, but it does alright in the end. So yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff. That's just like a little teaser to leave you with. But yeah, hopefully you've got a greater understanding of textures now. There is a lot more detail to it. Importing images, working in conjunction with Photoshop, a lot of mapping stuff, and particularly learning and understanding what the capabilities are there. Hopefully at the end of this I'll include some snapshots of different rendering styles, but good luck guys. To contact me at the details below. Otherwise I will see you soon. Cheers!